Howdy folks, welcome back to another Out of Spec Renew video, and today you join me here with this 2013 Fiat 500e. For those who've been watching the channel for a while, you might actually recognize this car. I did an onboard charger replacement in it, I don't know, maybe 6 or 8 months ago, something like that. But the car had a new problem that popped up, and the customer brought it back in, and they decided they didn't want to put any more money into fixing the car. So I actually bought it from them. So this is actually now my car. And we're going to go ahead and get it fixed up, and then I'll probably just sell it once I'm finished. But yeah, so essentially the issue that's going on here is it's got a problem with the battery pack control module, or BPCM, which is seeming to become more and more of a common issue on the 500Es. It seems like there's something like a soldered connection inside of there that seems to go bad over time, and it actually leads to a voltage measurement problem within the BPCM. So it's always monitoring all of the individual cell voltages, which it has a bunch of extra what would you call it, sort of a daisy chain of sort of balancing modules, and then the BPCM is sort of the master that controls all of those. So it's always monitoring all the individual cell voltages through that stuff, but it's also monitoring the total pack voltage. And what happened in this case, and what seems to be a pretty common theme with the failure modes on these, is that the total pack voltage that the BPCM is measuring does not match the sum of all of the cell voltages. So there's a mismatch in the voltage there, and basically it prevents the car from running. Along with that, it's also throwing the contactor out of sequence code. I think that's mostly just because the pack voltage doesn't match what it wants to see, so it's not allowing the second contactor to close. But anyway, we'll get the scan tool plugged in, and we'll take a look at the actual codes, and I'll kind of show you guys what the symptoms are that are going on. All right, so just to kind of show you guys what we've got going on here, I just have a power supply hooked up since the 12-volt battery doesn't really hold a charge here. It's been sitting for a while. But when we open up the door, we'll hear the contactors attempt to close, but then it actually opens again. So that was the contactor closing and then opening again. It didn't actually fully close the contactors like it's supposed to. If we go ahead and put the key in and attempt to start it, it will try to close the contactors again, and it'll fail. And it basically just says not ready, etc., etc. Service electric vehicle system. It is showing 47% on the dash, which is usually not a great sign on these. If you see 47%, that's a pretty good chance that the battery's bricked. In this case, we don't actually have that problem. Our battery's not bricked. It just happens to be at 47%, which was kind of something that I was initially worried about. I've actually seen it fluctuate back and forth a few times. It was actually showing a range number when I started it earlier, but now it's not showing a range number. But anyways, we'll leave it on here for now. We'll go ahead and get connected with our scan tool and see what we've got going on. All right, so we're in. We'll just run the auto scan here. Let it go through all the different modules. And of course, some of these might just be from low 12-volt battery and whatnot. So we've got BPCM fault, power supply voltage too low. So we have a contactor A stuck open, sense 1 circuit performance, contactor sequence incorrect, all that fun stuff. So let's see, let's just do an erase, and we'll try and start it again and just see what stuff goes away and what comes back. But essentially, we've got an issue with the BPCM that is causing it to be quite unhappy. All right, so our faults are all cleared. let's go ahead and hop back in. We'll attempt to turn the car off, and then we'll try to turn it back on again. There you go. Now it's actually showing a range number. But as you can see, we still don't get into ready. We still have our service electric vehicle system faults. So we'll run another scan here and see what actually comes back here. All right, so we've got DC to DC converter system performance. Obviously, it can't work with no high voltage. PIM fault, that's just, they always throw a PIM fault when they've got this stuff. BPCM fault. And we've got that contactor A stuck open, voltage sense 1 circuit performance, and contactor control sequence incorrect. So yeah, essentially what we've got there is the sequence is just incorrect for what we've got. So if we go in here to live data on the BPCM, we've got somewhere, yeah, so you can see we're around half for state of charge. It's not over discharge, it just happens to be at 47%. And we are able to still communicate with the BPCM, which you wouldn't normally be able to if the pack was fully discharged. And here you can see our issue. So we've got our battery voltage sum of cells, cell sum, is 376.4 volts, but the high voltage sensor, which is in the BPCM, is only measuring 360 volts. So we have, a 16 volt plus differential between those two voltage measurements. And that's essentially what's causing our problem here, is that it's measuring the incorrect voltage. So our next step here is going to be basically to start pulling this car apart. Now, I have a plan for this thing that we're going to try and do. The BPCM, of course, lives inside the battery pack. I've got a replacement right here. Fingers crossed this one works. This is actually just a cheap unit off of Alibaba. You cannot buy a new one of these from Fiat. They'll sell you a complete battery pack to the tune of about probably 25 grand, but you cannot buy just the BPCM. There's a company in Bulgaria that rebuilds these. I don't know anybody in the US that rebuilds them. And occasionally you can try and find like a used one on eBay or something. But even those were more expensive than this. So fingers crossed this works. There's some chatter on the Fiat 500e forums and stuff of people that have used these ones from Alibaba, and they've had good success with them. So I think my cost on it delivered was supposed to have been about $400, but then there were tariffs and stuff. So call it $500 is basically what this cost me. And yeah, so my theory here is that I'm hoping we can drop the pack out of this car just far enough to open the lid without having to remove the rear axle to completely remove the pack. And, well, I'll lift the car up and show you guys what exactly I'm talking about there. All right, before we get this thing lifted up, I might as well disconnect everything since there's no point in bringing it back down again. So I've disconnected the 12-volt battery, the high voltage disconnect on the 500e. We have some behind the seat here, underneath the rear seat cushion, and it's just this guy right here. So we're just gonna remove that, like so. Make sure the handle's all the way vertical, otherwise you won't be able to get it reinstalled afterwards. I'm just gonna set that right up there. All right, let's lift this thing up and I'll show you guys what I'm talking about on the battery removal. All right, so we've got the Fiat up in the air here. And so what I'm talking about here is that the battery pack actually goes over the top of the rear axle here. So this is the whole rear axle assembly. And then most of the battery pack is forward of the axle, but then it actually goes over the top of the axle and has this other portion that's sitting behind it. So in order to drop the pack fully out of the car, you have to remove this axle assembly, which isn't that terribly difficult. It's just kind of a pain in the butt because you have to undo all the brake lines and all that stuff. And then, of course, when you put it all back together, you have to bleed the brakes and yada yada. So my plan is to just disconnect the shocks, pull the springs out, and just let the axle droop as far as possible. And I think that I can drop the pack out probably close to a foot would be my guess once the axle is drooped down. I mean, as it is, we probably got, I don't know, 5 or 6 inches of clearance there. So I think once the axle droops down, you know, as far as it can go, we can probably drop this down a foot, maybe even slightly more. And I think that we can get enough clearance to actually pull the lid off of the pack without having to completely pull it from the car. I mean, obviously it's going to be unbolted from the car, but it won't be fully removed where we can move it around. So anyway, that's just my plan. We'll see if it works out. Before we can get started on that, we've got to remove these plastic shields. So we've got one on the front and one on either side. And then we'll have to disconnect our coolant lines and our high voltage connectors, which you might be able to see in there. So I'm going to get started on that. All right, so we got the plastic covers off the bottom of the car. Our front one, of course, covers all of our connectors and stuff here. I'm just going to put a couple of clamps on the coolant lines here so that hopefully we don't lose too much coolant out of the system. It's not a very long line, so we don't have a lot of area to clamp on, but hopefully we can get a decent squeeze on this so that we don't lose too much coolant. We might almost be better off just draining it all, but it just makes it easier to purge the system if you don't lose all of the coolant. All right, so I think we're good there. Then we can go ahead and disconnect our electrical connectors here. There we go. So that's our low voltage connector. For our high voltage connectors, we've got that. And then there we go. On this one, we've just got this big blue tab. And then we rotate our lever out of place. And then we've got one more locking tab there. There we go. So we're fully disconnected. All that's left is just that little ground strap there. Should be able to zip off pretty easily. And there we go. So I think at this point, we're just about ready to try and drop this. But first, we've got to disconnect our shocks on the rear axle, and I'm gonna go ahead and just pull the wheels off so that they're out of our way. Alrighty, so I've got the car kind of lowered back down, and I just have the suspension supported with these boards here, just so that we take the preload off of the spring so that this thing doesn't come flying down at us. So I'm going to go ahead and just unbolt the shocks here on either side. And that comes out nice and easy. We'll do this one. And there we go. So now we should be able to just pick the car back up, and we'll just let the axle droop down as far as it can possibly go. So that's as much droop as we're going to get out of it. I guess we don't have to remove the springs. They can just stay in there. There's no reason to pull them out. And we do still have clearance on the battery. So I think at this point, we're ready to unbolt the battery and try to drop it out of the car. And hopefully we've got enough access that we can actually pull the lid off of it. All right, so I've got the car all staged up. I've got some blocks under the battery just so it's not sitting directly on the table, and it gives us a little bit of space to get all the fasteners out. We've got 2 fasteners here just on the rear section, and then along the sides, we've got 4 more. So we've got 4 on each side plus the ones at the back. There's nothing else on the front side here other than our electrical connections, which are all already undone. So I'm just going to go ahead and zip all these bolts out. We'll lift the car up, and hopefully we've got enough clearance to pull the lid off of this thing. Okay, so the battery's fully unbolted. I'm going to go ahead and lift the car up, and we'll see how much clearance we can actually get here. All right, so that appears to be as far as we can go, because now the axle is hitting the battery right there. But we've actually got plenty of clearance here. So we can access all the fasteners in the lid. It's going to be a little bit tight up there, but our BPCM is in the front. So as long as we get all the fasteners out, we don't actually have to lift the back up very high. It's just the front of the lid that we'll have to lift. And it looks like we can probably get, I don't know, 8 or 10 inches out of that maybe, which should be plenty enough to get to that module. So yeah, I'll just start on the process of removing all the fasteners here. Not really much point showing that on camera. They're all just, I think they're M4 bolts with 8mm heads. So yeah, pretty simple. I'm just gonna zip all those out and then we should be able to lift the lid. This lid is a gasketed lid, so it just has a rubber gasket that goes all the way around. It's not silicone in place or anything, so that makes it super easy. All right, I've got all the fasteners out of the lid on the pack. I actually got a little bit of extra clearance by getting the parking brake cables out of the brackets here. That allowed the axle to drop down just a little bit more. I also had to slice through the warranty stickers on the pack lids. That's that green little piece of tape thing you can see there. So it's time to try and lift this pack lid up and get to the BPCM, which is going to be on this side right over here. And there we go. So, oh, actually I had my sides wrong. The BPCM is over here on this side. So that right there is our BPCM. So there's just 4 fasteners that hold it into place here. We've got that guy right there, that guy right there, and same on the other side. 2 electrical connectors, and we should be able to swap it out nice and easy. Alrighty folks, so we are going to go ahead and get the BPCM out of here. I'm going to start by removing the fasteners on the front portion of it here. We can get this little cover piece out of our way, which is where all the connectors are. And then we should be able to just drop the new one in its place. And then perhaps we can try and open this one up and see if we can actually see a visible failure. I've never opened one of these up with this problem before. I did previously have a customer that brought one of these in for basically the exact same failure, except theirs was intermittent, which kind of seems to be how usually these start out, as it starts as an intermittent issue, and then it just gets worse. This one seemingly never developed it intermittently. It just one day quit running, essentially. But yeah, so we've got that off. There's a little piece right here, so we don't want to lose those, especially inside of the battery. And this whole thing just kind of pops off. Just set this back here out of the way, and there we go. So that's our BPCM module. Undo the fasteners on the back side. There we go. So that's all 4 fasteners off. And then our last step is to just kind of pick it up out of here so that we've got enough wiggle room on it that we can unplug our harnesses. So we just have a couple of locking lever connectors here. So we want to start with the one on the far side. And that will just pop off like so. And then this one kind of sits underneath the other harness. So this one comes second. And there we go. So our module is removed. I'm going to go grab the other one and we're going to put it back into place, just in the reverse order. All right, so here's the new one. This one is not branded Bosch, but it has the same part number and everything on it. The actual listing on Alibaba for this thing says it's used, but it certainly doesn't look used. It looks brand new. So I don't know if they're like refurbished, like ones that have had similar problems and have been repaired, or what the deal is there, but hopefully it just works. Based on what I've heard, supposedly it should. So I guess we'll find out here shortly. Okay. Just set that right back down into position. I'll run the fasteners down on it. All right, there we go. So now I've just got to get our gasket sort of reattached to the lid everywhere that it needs to be. And then we can go ahead and button this thing all back up. All right, the battery lid is fully reassembled on there. So we're going to go ahead and drop the car back down. I'm going to get everything connected up, at least for the high voltage and low voltage connections. I'm probably not going to bother bolting the pack in just yet. Well, I don't know. It's not that much work to just bolt it in and see if it works. So yeah, I'll probably just go ahead and do that. So here we go. All right, let's go ahead and get everything reconnected here. So that's just going to push on like so. Bingo. This one we just push on and click that in. And then this one we push and slide that tab together. I guess the coolant lines we might as well go ahead and reconnect, hopefully without making too big of a mess. Maybe. Oh, there we go. I'm probably not going to bother with taking the clamps off just yet, just in case we have to take things back apart. Did that one snap in? Didn't sound like it. Maybe it did. All right, so we should be fully reconnected, other than just our little ground strap right here, which is a pretty easy fix. All right, we should be able to lower the car back down and see if it'll start. We might have to do, I can't remember what the procedure is called, but it's like a BPCM kind of relearn thing, or they call it like a, I don't remember what the procedure is. It's a procedure that you can do in Alpha OBD. Not sure if my Autel can do it. It probably can, but I don't know that I've ever tried it before. But we may or may not have to run that procedure, so I guess we'll find out here momentarily. Okay, it's time to try and boot this thing back up. I didn't bother reassembling the rear axle because that's not needed at this time. We just want to see if the car is actually going to work with its new BPCM. So we'll get our disconnect in there, of course, handle in the vertical position. When we push it down, it'll suck it into place, and we should be able to grab it without it coming loose. Let's go ahead and get our 12-volt battery. I don't know if it will have held a charge, but maybe we'll get lucky. It did spark a little bit, so maybe it did hold a charge. I guess I gotta find the key, which I think I set down someplace. So let me find it, and we'll try and see if this starts. All right, I got our key. Let's go ahead and push this back. Let's see if we get any signs of life. Nope. Okay, and we're showing 0 on the state of charge. Service 12-volt battery. Okay, so the 12-volt battery is definitely low. Let me get the power supply on this thing. We'll plug the scan tool in and see what we can figure out here. I've got the scan tool connected, and I've got the power supply on so that we don't kill our 12-volt battery. Let's try again there. So we're showing 0%, so we must not be getting any data from the BPCM. So let's go diagnostics. We want to go to the BPCM. And actually, we don't want to do it that way. We want to go control unit. Powertrain. Is it under chassis? BPCM, there we go. Okay, special function, contactor test, balance test. Oh, replace BPCM. This function will, ignition must be cycled once this routine is completed. Okay. Close. Okay. So, we will do another reset. Okay, we still got nothing. Okay, well, let's see if we get any live data from it. Okay, so it is communicating. It's got all the voltages. Got all this stuff. Where's our pack voltage? Bus voltage. Oh, there we go. So cell sum and high voltage sensor. So you can see we're within a volt there. So we're close enough to be, I think, where it should be happy, but we still have faults. So maybe we just have to clear some DTCs here. So let's go back to auto scan, fault scan. Okay, let's do an erase. Okay, so we do still have a fault on the BPCM. Let's see, what is our fault on the BPCM? Failure level 2. Okay, so maybe now we can go back and run this replacement routine. Maybe it won't actually do it if those other faults are present. Will enable contactors upon replacement, ignition must be cycled. Enabled. Okay. Maybe before we hit close, maybe we have to cycle the ignition. That's my thought. Oh, we have state of charge, which we didn't have before, so that's a plus. We'll hit close on that. And then it went back to 0, but we did at least get something there. We're probably going to have a bunch more faults here again. Maybe not. We only have a couple. So let's do another erase. So it is still unhappy about that one. Let's see if we have a different thing that we can do here. Well, clearly we're still unhappy about something, so maybe I have to break out alpha OBD and try to run the procedures with that. Because it's definitely not happy for whatever reason. I guess we'll try and do it that way. All right, I'll come back to you guys when I've got some more info here. All right, my laptop's dead, so I'm not actually sitting in the car anymore, but I've got the Bluetooth OBD2 dongle plugged in, and we're going to try and use alpha OBD here. This is a Fiat, Chrysler, Mopar, whatever specific program that works pretty well on the 500e. So I wanted to try and see if I could get the procedures to work on the Autel, but it looks like either it's not working or there's something else wrong. So we'll give it a shot with this program here, see if this does the trick. I mean, we seem to be able to communicate to the BPCM, but for whatever reason, our procedure doesn't seem to do what it's supposed to do. So let me make sure I've got the right thing. We want Bluetooth, LX, MX, whatever. So we've got that correct. We want to connect to the BPCM. We've got OBD link LX. And in theory, we should be able to connect as long as we've got good enough Bluetooth signal. Okay, so we do. So we're connected. We want to go status and faults. We'll just hit read faults. No data received. Okay. Failed. Not supported in active diagnostic session. Okay. I actually just thought of another thing that we might be able to try. There might be a procedure we have to do in the BPCM. Let's see, can it connect to that? Okay, so we did get a fault there. Let's clear. Let's go to plotted data, just see what it's showing. Nope. Okay, so we don't have a procedure that we need to run there. Let's go back to pack control module. Variant 1 through variant 3 doesn't matter. It'll automatically just connect to whichever one happens to be the right thing. I don't even know if there are actual variants, but there you can see it just defaulted to 3 there. Let's try this again. Interesting. Try to adjust interface timeout and inner request time. Let's give that a shot. Timeout. That's set to max. That's set to max. Inner request time. We'll just set that to max. That's at max. Strange. I don't know why we can't seem to connect with this. Maybe we do have something else going on here that's... I don't understand why I'd be able to see the data with the Autel and not with this. Unless we've got a problem with our Bluetooth connection, where it's just not being a quick enough data readout for this thing to see it. I might have to try... I've got a wired cable that we can use to plug in as well, direct to the laptop, but since the battery's dead, I can't bring the laptop into the car, at least not without running another extension cord here or something. So I guess I'll keep playing around here, see what I can find out, and if I have to, we'll try and run the wired connection, see if that makes a difference. So I've got some updates. I disconnected the 12-volt battery just to kind of run a reset on this thing, and now, well, maybe it won't do it just then, but it actually closes the contactors now. Oh, because I have the key on. So if I... There you go. So it closes the contactors. It does not have any powertrain faults, but it is showing 0% and charge low, and it won't actually let me put it into a gear other than neutral. So I'm going to try and plug it in and see if that makes it happy. It just seems like it doesn't really know what state of charge it's at, even though it seemed to before. So yeah, I'm just going to plug it in, see if we can get it to take a charge, and then we'll kind of go from there once we get an idea of if the car is going to take any power or do whatever. All right, let's go ahead and plug this in, see if it's going to charge. I don't know if you guys can see on the dash there, but the contactors did close. The EVSE says it's charging, and it seems to say that it's charging on the dash. What does our SOC say here? So that says 0%. I'm going to take the clamps off of the coolant lines, and we'll try and put some coolant in here and make sure that it doesn't overheat itself on the charger. All right, so the Fiat's been charging here for about an hour now. It's actually starting to show state of charge on the dash, and it seems to be rising pretty quickly, so I think it's sort of relearning the capacity. I guess you can't... It's a little too bright to make out on camera, but it says 28%. And we're at 2 flashing bars on the dash now. And on our scan tool, we're showing a little over 4 volts per cell, which is actually, this is probably more like 80, 85% state of charge. So I think that here in the top end, it's going to, once it gets to 100%, hopefully it's kind of fully calibrated and it'll be good to go. But yeah, while we're waiting on the car to charge, I'm going to go ahead and get started putting the rear axle and stuff back together, and we'll get our plastic panels back on underneath. And then hopefully by the time all that's together, it's basically done and we can take it for a test drive, although it might be dark by then. It's already starting to get a little bit dark outside. So I guess we'll see whether or not we have any light by the time this thing's ready to take for a spin. So we're still waiting for the 500e to finish charging here. So I figured we might as well go ahead and open up the old BPCM to see if we can visually tell if anything's wrong. I mean, clearly it seems like it's got to either be some kind of failed component or perhaps a bad solder joint. I guess I should probably try to look at the wiring diagrams to see where this thing is measuring pack voltage. Although I'm not sure that I can actually get the wiring diagrams for the battery pack internally. So this lid is going to be glued on here. Let me see if I can get a flathead screwdriver or something else we can pry that lid apart with. All right, don't know how effective this is going to be, but we'll give it a shot. I mean, I'd rather not completely destroy the lid on this if there is any chance that it can be rebuilt. But I guess it's not really of much value to us if it's broken anyways, so. What is going to be the best way to do this? Obviously, I don't want to break it, But, all right, well, I kind of mangled the lid on this thing, but I did get it off. So we've got our board in here, and I don't see any visual signs of anything that looks burnt or anything like that, which I probably wouldn't expect to for this particular failure mode. Do we see any corrosion anywhere, perhaps? Don't think so. Let's see if we can pull the board out and get a look at the backside of it. I don't know if we'll actually be able to visually see anything that's wrong with this, but who knows? I mean, it could just be a case of a solder joint that's failing, essentially. But who knows? Well, I don't know if I can get the board out. Yeah, the connector on here is pretty glued to the base. How solidly is the board attached? It might be kind of bonded in here, so we might not be able to get that out, really. I don't know if there's more components on the back side of it or not, but perhaps not. Don't know. I'm not missing any fasteners, I don't think. Well, maybe I can do some research and see if I can find a pinout for this thing and determine whether or not we can figure out where it's measuring the pack voltage from, because I think that's really the problem, is that it's measuring the pack voltage incorrectly at this module. I don't really see any solder joints that look bad. I guess maybe we could have a capacitor or something that's not any good, but I don't see anything that looks visually damaged. Anyway, I guess that's enough of that. I'm guessing that the Fiat is probably getting pretty close to fully charged, so hopefully we'll be able to take it on a test drive here shortly. All right, well, it appears the 500e has stopped charging. So let's see what we're at. Okay, so it's showing 81% state of charge. And apparently now it's charging again. Yeah, I mean, that's basically full 4.1 volts per cell. I mean, it might charge up a little bit, and maybe it'll continue to readjust its state of charge estimate there. I guess I'll let it charge here for another 5 minutes or so and see if the SOC increases on the dash that it's showing, and then we'll probably try and take it for a spin. All right, I think we've completed charging. I've got the car on here. We're showing 99% on the dash, which is close enough. Showing 87 miles with climate off, 78 with climate on, apparently. Let's go ahead and take this for a little spin and see what we got going on. It is dark out, so unfortunately we're not going to have super great quality for driving, but we can at least take it for a quick little spin and make sure that everything seems good, which, I mean, the car's moving under its own power, so presumably it is. All right, I'll see you guys when we get to the street. All right, off we go, taking a little spin. Everything seems to be good so far. We'll just go for a little cruise around the block here, see how it does with good full throttle pull. I mean, I don't think we're going to have any issues here. Might have a low tire, it looks like, so we'll probably have to take care of that, but that's not too big of a deal. All right, I just realized my jacket was covering up my mic, so hopefully the audio is all right there, but off we go. Sweet. Car seems to be doing what it's supposed to be doing. Everything works. We'll probably have to air up some tires. That might just be because it's gotten a bit colder and the tires are probably a touch low. We'll go ahead and take this thing back to the shop. And then I guess I've just got to get this thing cleaned up because I'm probably not going to keep it. It's probably just going to go right up for sale. And yeah, I mean, it's in pretty good shape for a 2013. I mean, usually the driver's seat on these, the side, tends to kind of blister and come apart on the vinyl. This one's actually in better shape than most. It is pretty low mileage, only has 47,000 miles on it. It's got a sunroof. which is kind of nice. And yeah, obviously you can't see anything because it's dark in here, but yeah, it seems like a pretty solid car now that everything's taken care of on it. Well, folks, that's going to be a wrap on this one. So pretty straightforward repair. Didn't take too terribly long. But yeah, the programming stuff on these cars can be a little bit funky, but we were able to just do that BPCM replacement procedure, and then just disconnecting the 12 volt and reconnecting it seemed to be what got the trick to be able to close the contactors again, and then it just kind of needed to relearn its state of charge. So just, plugging it in to charge it. I actually charged it for a couple of different cycles, so it stopped charging at one point and it said it was only at 67%. When I opened and then closed the door, it started charging again. And the next time I think it went to like 81%, and then it did it one more time, and then it went basically to full, which is where it's at now. So yeah, pretty straightforward procedure. This does seem to be becoming a pattern failure on these 500Es. Sometimes it fails intermittently, where you have this issue only on occasion, and it seems to be maybe kind of temperature related, maybe not. But at least in one case that I saw, it seemed that it was temperature related, where it would only fail when the temperature was cold enough. If it was warm enough, it would work just fine. This one, of course, was basically permanently failed. We couldn't get it to close the contactors no matter what we did. And it just had that voltage mismatch for the BPCM's voltage measurement of the total pack voltage. And that seems to be just the textbook failure mode for these, is it does that voltage measurement mismatch, and it throws usually a positive contactor stuck code. And that's just par for the course on these when they suffer from this failure. So yeah, now I guess I just have to decide what I'm going to do with this thing, since it's now my car. Obviously it needs a little bit of cleanup since it's got some moss and stuff on it, and then most likely I'm probably just going to put the car up for sale. But yeah, anyway, kind of a fun project, and this car is actually in remarkably good shape for a 2013, which was the first year of the 500e. It's now a 12 going on 13-year-old car, I guess. It's got basically brand new tires on it, even though they're just kind of cheap off-brand tires. Iron Man tires, I guess. The interior's in nice shape. Usually the side on the driver's seat, on the bottom cushion, the side bolster, usually that gets kind of blistered and it starts coming apart on the vinyl. This one's actually still basically fully intact, more or less. The interiors on these are pretty cheapy, so they just don't tend to hold up super well, but this one's actually better than most. The steering wheel is kind of peeling a little bit, so that's not super great, but the sunroof and everything's fully functioning. We've got a little bit of dull paint on this section right here in front of the sunroof, but other than that, the rest of the car seems to be in pretty good shape. Could probably do with a little bit of a detail and, of course, a wash. But anyway, enough rambling on, and hopefully you guys enjoyed this one, and as always, thanks for watching.